We ready?
Yeah.
Oh, well, welcome to the Minecraft podcast. My name is Dr. Kimberly Quinn, and I have the absolute pleasure of having Dr. Lynda Ulrich back again because we just weren't done yet, and now we have more to say. And I'm super stoked. Dr. Lynda is the founder of the Goodness Exchange website and host of the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. Also, she's got this amazing newsletter out there. Has gazillions of people, 10,000 plus, and all of that will be below in the notes for you to click on. She'll have all kinds of stuff down there. So right now, I just want to say, welcome to the show, Dr. Lynda.
I'm delighted to be back. You and I are just birds of a feather when it comes to talking about what happens between our ears and how it affects our daily lives.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. About all things cognitive. So Dr. Lynda's got so many thoughts swirling around that magnificent mind of hers. And I think, well, you were telling me maybe you like to start out with the power of the pause. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, so almost everything I might mention to you and your audience is couched in this strange and wonderful experience I've been on for about 10 years. I was a dentist for 25 years. And then suddenly I said to myself, God, the bad news is really starting to hit people. This was about 2013. Hard. People that I'd known who had been always cheerful and lovely were having a lot of future fatalism in 2013-14. I don't know if you remember, but that's when like beheadings started to make the news. I mean, the news was going in the tank, but then it really reached an all-time low. And I was always saying somebody's got to do something about the bad news. So finally, one day, there's a story there. I started writing one article a day on anything under the sun to prove it's still an amazing world. So that's the perspective from what I've come from. I've been literally with a team curating the internet for goodness and progress for 10 years. Not like puppies in mailbox sort of stuff, but like dogs can smell breast cancer at stage 2. Like we need to know all this amazing leaps of human innovation and wonder that are out there. We can't walk without our knuckles dragging every day. So back to the power of the pause. So I started really thinking about what was going on in our minds when we were confronted with things like the terrible news story I mentioned already, or a million others. And I thought, okay, so the news, we can't change the way the news is coming at us from all directions, or social media is so mean-spirited sometimes and all that. But what we can change is our reaction to it, which I'm sure is what you talk to people about 100% of the time, right? And I noticed that if you look at people in the world, in history, who were considered the most graceful and thoughtful people of great wisdom, their brains were made just like yours and mine. They're going to want to jump to outrage and all those negative emotions when they're struck by something bad. But you know what they had? They had a power of pausing for probably 2-3 seconds. They had that down. Think about how good, just considering today is the day after Martin Luther King Day. Whoa, think about a guy who had to learn to pause before he reacted to things. Mother Teresa, there's some stories about the stuff that she endured and took from others who were quite heartless. And no matter who, Gandhi, you name them, they were all really good at pausing for just a few seconds and shifting up from their amygdala to the part of their brain that's all in charge of thoughtfulness, planning ahead, critical thinking. The amygdala is this place in our mind that I don't know about you, Kim, am I right when I say that it's pretty easy to think we haven't had an upgrade up here from that amygdala to the cerebral cortex in about 35,000 years? We're all still kind of left with the software from the caveman days. Is that right?
Oh my God, for sure. I mean, when we're in limbic mode, right, then we're just, the prefrontal cortex is just talking about is offline, and as we both know that's our rational thinking that talks us down from the proverbial edge. So when there's a disconnect there and we're just in being chased by a saber-toothed tiger mode, only all it is I didn't respond to my boss in time and now I might get fired and now wasn't invited to this and FOMO and it's just moved into now, right? And
Yes.
I was wondering too, Dr. Lynda, does that does that take us to, you were talking about another point about when you talk about the limbic system and the power of the pause, that also means when we're not doing that, we're thinking with our feelings, right?
Absolutely. Can I give you a couple tips? I would recommend, not because it's self-serving at all, I don't have anything to gain from it, but I did do a tremendous accidental TED talk about the power of the pause for a really wonderful TED group in India, right
Oh,
in the heart of the
good.
pandemic. So if people want to hear a little bit more about my perspective that I've learned from all these thought leaders on the Good News website, because that's where I get all this, is I'm just constantly every day. I've talked to 3 just today, talking to people who are tackling some of the world's most vexing problems, and they have to have a strategy because they are out there. They are confronting some of the craziest stuff, and they have mastered the power of the pause. I can guarantee it. So if people want to look up my name, Dr. Lynda Ulrich, and the power of the pause, you'll tap into a really neat TED talk that'll give you a lot more context for what I'm just about to say. But here are my 3 tips that go with that. I know we want to talk about so many things today, Kim, so I'm just going to cut straight to the chase on this one.
Totally.
Okay. So when I pause, and I can have the wherewithal to do that, because things strike me badly every day, just like everyone else. I'm not like the rose-colored glasses woman. Um, I try and I see which one of 3 strategies are best for the moment. One thing I do is I pause and I get truly curious about the other person's perspective. I just pause and say, wow, I would have never thought of it that way. Improve my way of thinking on this. Share with me how you come by this way of thinking. And I don't land like on the that it's some I don't fake my way through it. If somebody
Right.
says something really off the wall, um, I don't act like I'm judging. I just am truly curious. You go right down the middle. Not that they will always say something that takes you by surprise. 100% of the time, people have a story and they'll tell you their story, or just enough of it that it totally makes sense. Their point of view makes sense from where they're coming from. So that's one of the things I do. I just pause and I get curious if I can pull that wherewithal up. Another one is I'll say something like, uh, tell me more. 'Cause that's how I keep my own self in the game. Once they get going, and I'm still trying to sort of in my head, trying to make sense of what I'm hearing. I'll just whenever I can, I'll say, tell me more. And that, people want to be heard these days. And I think this whole problem of us constantly arguing with each other and all that is, I don't know if it's a factor of that the gaps are that big in our way of thinking. I think it's just that we're not validating each other.
Right.
So what I do on that second one is I listen to understand, not to get ready to say what I want to say next. How many times is that our strategy? Even if we've got the wherewithal to say, tell me more, what we're doing is we're often sitting there just getting our next comment teed up. We're not really listening to understand. And I think those two strategies often help me get through these moments where I would be driven to fear, anger, outrage, all these negative emotions. And if I can pull that off, I can stay in curiosity and
Right.
creativity and, you know, just a way more joyful way of interacting with others. And I always learn something. That's the last thing I'll say to people is that I have literally never come out of a conversation where I've had to use this, where I didn't feel like I was seriously changed forever. Most of the time, if you really bring your heart to saying that, tell me more, or, improve my way of thinking, wow, people tell you the darndest things. So that's the power of the pause.
No, very much agree with you, and I'm in sync. And I don't want to get too tangential, but I think it's something like politics. I mean, if people would
Yes.
just shut up, and listen, like not just nod and smile in a patronizing way, where in your head you're saying, I'm really right, my opinion's right, and but actually
Mhm.
truly let go of that and
Yes.
hear them. I think there's very little of that going on right now, especially with
Mhm.
that particular context.
Yeah, of course, I'm dancing around the edges. I almost never talk politics, but I will tell you, I recommend a really important book that helped me think a new way about politics and this outrage that seems to be springing up from all sides right now. I came across this amazing book by a Berkeley sociologist who really could not understand the outcome of the 2016 election. She was just totally, like a Berkeley person would be, her and her husband. And so she looked up what the most conservative county in the country was. She found that it's somewhere in, I think it's Mississippi, where all the big Alcoa plants are. And don't you know, she and her husband moved there. They literally, for real, moved there for 3 years because she had the best notion in her heart. She was just going to live in this community, actually do it, not think of it like some study or they were the
Right,
subjects
right,
of her
right.
study. She was going to join a church and be on the school board and do all the things and really understand what it was like to think this way and what points of view were leading leading them to such different conclusions about the world than she had. And it's a great book. I'll make sure that I get you. I think it's called Stranger in Our Own Land.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's a great book. And one of the things that's in there, well, I'm not going to give you the punchline. There is an overall big picture takeaway that I think is very reasonable for everybody to be coming from. It's just that again, I'm asking people to pause and jump ahead. The bottom line is that she says we all have this mentality that we don't want people to cut in line in front of us.
Okay. All right.
And, I'm as susceptible to that as anybody. It's unfair. I pay too much taxes, or what, this is a burden on me, or all the things that people say about society. What if we could just pause and really take a look at why people's lived experiences lead them to different conclusions than us? So I'll
Right.
get to the name of that book because it made me feel a lot better about our political world. Not great, but a lot better.
No, I love that. And I don't talk politics either. I usually get this gaze across, my face with it.
Yeah.
I think that just came to mind because I was thinking of an extreme example of, because we're all about active listening, right? So I was thinking of an
Yes.
extreme example of the polar opposite. And that's
Mm,
what brought my head. Even though I don't like to talk politics either. I just kind of like you say, tap dance or
mhm,
tiptoe around it. But I think, like I said, the opposite of it is staying in limbic mode. And so we're actually using we start to stand a little more upright. And as you say, pull our knuckles off the floor and use our rational, metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. We can
mhm.
put our best, most sophisticated, intellectual, good-hearted selves
Yes.
in the conversation and
Yes.
grow. We can't
Yes.
grow without new info, right?
Yes. Yes. And or even empathy and compassion, Once you hear another person's story, it's never a surprise how they
Right.
got to their way of thinking. Never. And it's so beautiful eventually if you listen long enough to just appreciate another human being story.
100%. And also I think to throw it in there that for whatever the reason with the not don't want to be cut in line, that's a very good, sort of metaphorical statement there. For whatever reason, I lost my train right there. For whatever reason, I don't know why we're so afraid of that. Oh, there we go. Because no one's saying you have to change your mind.
Yeah.
It's just hearing where they come from.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one's trying to persuade you. And even if they want to
Yeah.
persuade you, nobody can take your thoughts. One of the few things that cannot be
Yeah.
taken away from us. Yet
Right.
there's a fear of being cut in line.
Yeah, so the gist of it is, like most people, all of us do this. I'm trying to think of a simple example for me. Like I have a home in Fairfield that was then the zoning board in Fairfield, Vermont was super strict. Oh, what we went through to get this house built
Yeah.
was something else.
Mhm.
Well, now it's completely the opposite way. The pendulum has swung. They're not questioning everything, and I'm like, hey, how come those houses are going up so fast? It's like they're cutting in line in front of me. They're getting it easy, and I had
Totally.
it so hard. It's like that mentality of cutting in line, and nobody likes that. feeling of somebody else. If you worked hard for something, you just think that somebody else should have to be in line behind you and wait for their turn too, and not have anything handed to them. And we all have these moments of lack of, I don't know, you're definitely not using our our higher thinking in those
Oh my
processes. But
gosh,
anyway, if you
no.
get somebody's story, you understand that maybe they're not cutting in line. Maybe they have a different path that they are arriving where they're at.
No, you know what? I'm part of a mastermind group, and one of the masterminds had this shirt on at the last conference, and I don't remember it exactly. Basically, it said, every single person you meet today is fighting a battle of which you're unaware. That's very
Mm,
paraphrased, but it said something like that in fewer words. And that's
yeah.
so true. We walk around like assumption making machines, which leads to
Yes.
further assumptions and untruths. And it's no big surprise we end up in conflict.
Yeah. To that point of I've been saying this a lot lately. I found again the thought leaders teach me so many things. Um, I've caught a few on a bad day. I interviewed a guy. This guy is amazing. He's figured out that single mothers make the best game wardens in Africa. Want to have an interesting conversation? That is something else. What he's realized about why single mothers can end conflict without a shot fired, and if the game wardens were men, there'd be 6 people dead.
Right, 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 right.
It's really it's not what you think either. Just to cut a little bit to it, it turns out that single mothers in Africa have had to be calculating and how to reduce the violence in their life. They have to every minute think about their vulnerability since they're 1 years old. And so they don't go into a situation asking for trouble. They
Right.
know how to de-escalate. They know how to de-escalate. They've been doing it because they're at the bottom of the totem pole, the social totem pole. They've been doing it their whole lives. And it turns out, okay, so Damien Mander is somebody I interviewed. And I'm telling you, the day I interviewed, he's literally leaning up against the wall in his hut in Africa. And it was a terrible interview. He was in such a bad mood and he was exhausted and could barely put a sentence together. And he was an easy guy for me to not judge, right? Because I could only imagine he's saving the lives of endangered species every day and his life is on the line. Okay, so Damien Mander was easy for me to just extrapolate and say, yeah, he's having a bad day. It's not about me. I don't have to take it personally. I can get through this. But remember that everybody's a little bit of a Damien Mander in their own lives. They're fighting on several fronts, and just because we don't know their story doesn't
We
mean
don't know.
aren't every bit the hero that Damien Mander is, an exhausted hero.
No, I love that. And it's taking my place to another place. That's taking my brain to another place, which is very related. When we talk about things, in the course I teach Minecraft, whether it's anxiety, it's depression, or it's this or that it just like what you're saying with the middles where I'm going. We have like a little nervous and we can't get out of the dorm or the bed to go to work. And then we have the obvious over here and we have the little nervous. The whole middle though is they might be walking around, maybe undiagnosed or whatever, walking around in suits and dresses or whatever they're wearing, looking totally put together with good posture, schmoozing, holding it together as a professional, and they're freaking exhausted from holding that charade together. But they, on the outside looking in, they look like they've got it all going on. Don't you think it's similar?
Yes, and if triggered, that whole facade, that whole
Mhm.
charade can fall apart in an instant, and you can think you're sitting with somebody you knew or you loved or you whatever, and then boom, they just fall apart right in front of our eyes, and then there we are judging.
Right,
But all along we had no idea that they only had about this much head space left before
right.
they they blew their top, right? So a dental office, where I'm a dentist for 30 years, a dental office is a great place that has taught me that, because everybody who comes to the dental office is already scared. I mean, people are scared to even get their teeth cleaned because of what I might tell them, right?
Right, 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 right.
Right? So dentistry has taught me that to always assume that people got about this much headroom before they blow their stack.
Wow.
Because in the dental office, it's always like that. Every single person is almost at their max of challenge and fear and all that stuff. So when you become a student of body language like we have to be dentists
Yeah.
to notice, oh, Janine, you're not yourself today. I've known you for 30 years. What's going on? I once asked a woman that question in the office. She was an older woman, and we had already put her chair back to do her filling, and she just wasn't answering my questions right. So I
Mm,
sat her back up and I said, Janine, and she was being really short tempered and stuff, and she'd never been like that. I said, Janine, what's going on? I'm not in a hurry. What can I help you with? Holy moly. In her family, there was a really bad ne'er do well nephew, and nobody would take him in. He was literally going to have to live on the street, and she decided to take him in. How kind.
hmm.
But he was stealing from her, and she was afraid of him. She didn't even want to go back to her home after the dental appointment. She'd gotten so afraid of him. And she told us that, and we immediately knew who to call with social services. And the dental assistant, she heard what was going down here, and she was gone to go make phone calls before Janine even, finished the conversation. But there, in that moment, we didn't have to just plow ahead with our plan to fix her
Right, right,
tooth.
right.
What needed attention that day was her heart and her courage
Hmm.
and her home, or safety in her home, right? So, and it did work out that she got the right people to help her and to give her a little support so that she could work this out. And he moved on. But woo, what if I'd just been barreling down the road, not sensitive to the moods of others? And even though she was being kind of kind of mean to us, I just knew that wasn't her. And so I paused and I got curious and I listened. We can
Well,
all do that for the
and
people that are striking us the wrong way.
you validated her. Well, I mean, the way I look at that too is that obviously people who are whole and complete and happy don't behave that way,
Yes, right.
right? I mean, when we're in the zone, like, so behavior is coming from a broken place. If it's if it's negative, and actually you said mean, like, if that it's actually because you're coming from like a wounded place, right? Because
Mhm.
happy people don't act like that. And I think that you also probably just talking her away from the edge by validating her probably took a lot of air out of the balloon, I'm guessing. Even without the
Oh, yeah.
actions, like the actual helpful actions of social services, just letting letting you in the door, right, to
Yeah.
hear her pain, so that, and in her fear and all that stuff that was in her rib cage, lessened all of it, because, oh, cat's out of the bag now,
Mhm.
and I'm not alone in it
Yes.
anymore.
Yeah, I have another little story kind of like that. It's a thought leader, one of the most important young thought leaders under 30 in the environmental world. I was all teed up to interview him. I had the most extraordinary pre-call with him. And then things went very wrong on the day that I was going to interview him, and I could tell that the energy was just too weird. And I'm okay. Like, I've recorded out 8 weeks, so it was fine. I wanted to preserve that relationship and really get the best of him because my pre-call had been so wonderful. Well, I just said, oh gosh,
Mm.
this is these are complex things. You're working with the UN and you're working with most important people in South America, da, da, you feel exhausted to me. And I feel like I really want to just give you a hug, but here we are in virtual world.
Right,
How
right,
about
right.
if the virtual hug I give you is to just like, let's like take an hour, take the hour that you're going to spend with me and go spend it with yourself or your dog or something really important to you. And then I'm fine. We can just record tomorrow or the next day. And so that's what we decided to do. And he did have a dog, and we had a great conversation about dogs, and that kind of let us sort of slide out of the conversation. Well, 2 days later, he did get back to me and said he was right on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He
Oh,
just had
wow.
too much going on, and he was going to have to like check himself out for a month into some strange place he knew of in the Andes. And I was I think it's back to another subject I hope that we get to talk about is the difference between hope and expectations.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And really noticing these days that this power to pause and to make a better way forward that serves everybody, like a win-win if you can pull it off, is really about the difference between hope and expectations. Like I'd hoped so bad I was going to interview that guy. He has like 1 million LinkedIn followers, and he's really saying some incredibly fresh things. And I just love what he's doing. Really hoped, but I've learned that what gets in the hope is something you can just always have forever. It's just always
Right,
there.
right.
But expectations are what trip us up. I'd like to hear, I'm sure that you talk a lot about the danger of expectations. But that's what I see is wrong with some of the terrible negativity on the internet is they're crushing people's hopes and dashing people's expectations at the same time. It's like a karate move. And
It is.
I think, yeah, and I think that responsible journalism does not have to do that. I think we can hear about the worst story in the world, and journalists, we could go to a more responsible world of journalism where they know there was somebody out there working on it. If you did a report about whatever you want, whales dying in some fishing village in Mexico because of whatever reason, I'm absolutely sure there is a group out there who are trying to save those whales. I'm absolutely confident there's not a problem in the world that I've run into that there isn't somebody, some very tired person trying to fix. And
Mhm.
journalists could be reporting the negative story to us, and they could be leaving us with some hope at the end. They could be saying, yeah, but there's this group that's da 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 da. And I just think that in order to really live a happy life, this getting clear about our expectations that are so fragile and so outside our control is a completely different thing than hope. Hope is something we can just generate forever. We can seek signs of goodness and progress and keep filling that well. But expectations, we're almost always in trouble there.
I couldn't agree more, actually. And I've said it a lot that one of the positives of growing up with two alcoholic parents was that you learn not to have expectations. I'm being truthful. It's a big, huge positive because honestly, since young, things were pretty half full for me because
Yes.
when you learn to not expect things of people who can't deliver, right? And so and I'm
Right.
not saying it negatively, I'm saying it positively. You learn to be kind of very independent. You learn to get on it yourself. And of course, that can be taken to extreme. You got to pull back a little bit. But as a grown-up person now, it's just like, wow, you you surprised me with a birthday cake, or wow, and it's all plus. It's all a bonus. It's all just, you
Bonus.
just stop by to go to lunch. Yay. Like
Right.
it's just
Yes.
it presents such a rosy, because the flip side of that, when we have
Yes.
expectations, especially somebody's like a serial expector, yeah, then you're going to be set up for loads of disappointment because we can only control ourselves, right? Control is a
Right.
big illusion. And as you know, you and I've talked about this, it's also very Buddhist that when we attach ourselves to outcomes, meaning that they're out here, when we put
Yeah.
that our needs to be happy out here, then we have those individuals have to deliver for us to feel happy in here. So actually, what I learned from living in an addicted household was my
Yes.
happy was in here, at like
That
little,
is
without having any language to put to it or knowing what was going on.
that is such an important fine point. I think when how there are people out there who are always thinking they're kind of petty and they're kind of nitpicky and they whine about a lot of things, the complainers in our lives. What if they just never got challenged and challenged and challenged the way you're describing? My dad was a great one. He was a physician who treated everybody in our town, gave everybody his home phone number. He took calls every night, at least the phone rang 6 times. He was such a humanitarian physician, the old school kind that delivered your baby and took out your tonsils and the whole thing.
Mhm.
And yet, we never saw him ever. So to your point, I have very little expectations about what's going to happen next for me, like a vacation to come true or a dinner out or whatever, because we just learned that we never went on vacation. We planned it. It was planned, but if he had a baby that was due, he wouldn't leave town. He was the only doctor that could deliver. And so I learned in my life too. I think if people think about it, what if that constant expectation problem and expectations dashed
Mhm.
is because maybe by some good thing, bad thing way in the world, people like you and I have lived as children, learning that it just doesn't pay to expect anything.
No, it leads to disappointment.
Yeah.
It leads to disappointment. And I guess the one exception would be small child and growing up with basic needs.
Yeah.
That's like a given. But outside of the basic essentials, to just expect this and expect this and expect somebody, how often does it happen in relationships when we expect our partner to know how we feel? Well, mind reading is not something we're capable as of yet. Right? We think we are.
Yeah.
So how many conflicts does that cause? Where if you don't expect, just ask. Like,
Yes. Yes.
I need you to listen to me, please. Or what are you feeling? Or just instead of all the expectations cause a mess of
Yeah.
disappointment.
And I just wanna reiterate that expectations are not the same as hope.
Right.
Like you and I could still hope my dad would come to that swim meet, but I had no expectations. They were completely different. And because these days, I tell you, I am really encouraging people, Kim, to care about their worldview as much as they do their abs.
Excellent. Excellent. Boy, that's a statement and
No,
a half.
it's so important. Like your worldview, it's where you come from at every minute. It's where you come from when your kids challenge you in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's where you come from when that coworker that you can't stand does yet another crazy thing. It's where you come from when you get cut off in traffic. Your worldview. And I would love for you to talk to us about the neuroscience on this. I think your worldview that's why I brought it up. It determines your expectations, right? So
Mhm.
if you have a very terrible worldview,
Right.
you're gonna think of other that you're gonna always think somebody's trying to take advantage of you, and you're gonna have that problem with always thinking people have bad intentions. If your worldview is very, very bad or very limited, you're gonna give your kids different advice. You're definitely not gonna be the idea person at work. You're gonna be the idea crasher. You
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
and think about how all this plays out over the scope of time. If you have a worldview that's limited and negative and full of limiting beliefs, um, you are going to have a different lived experience because all the time we get what we give, right?
Mhm.
If you're the negative person in the circle or around the water cooler or wherever in the downward spiral conversations, nobody's going to look at you and think, oh, I love this person in my circles.
Oh, totally.
Right? So you're going to have a lived experience of a loneliness or in the work environment. I think our worldview is especially important. Always talking to people about the fact that you got to be careful what you're listening to in the car on the way to work. If you're listening to
100%.
talk radio that just is talking about a world that's come unglued and anecdotal story after story after story of all the things that are wrong in the world, you're not going to push the door open at work and be collaborative.
Probably not. I totally plan the expenditure of my life minutes in the Jeep on the way in and out from campus. It's
That's
podcasts of, Wayne Dyer and just, uplift, uplift, uplift. My dear friend Oprah, she's
yes.
just not aware of it. Just all the uplift because I want my life minutes, to be spent like as if they're cash, just I don't
Yes.
waste it on negativity. It doesn't mean not know what's going on, but other than that, I go on a news fast. Like I don't want to reside there. I just
You want me
because
to
you're right, we
just
do
throw a few
prime it.
lines in let me throw a few lines in about the news pass thing. I was so mad at the news recently that I put out this thing. Okay, that's it. I'm going on news. Pass. And let me tell you what happened because I think it's something we've got to consider. I would rather people go on a journey seeking signs of goodness and progress than slam the door. And I'll tell you why. So I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and New York Times because I get interviewed a lot, and I'm always getting accused of having rose-colored glasses. Like I don't really know what's going on in the world. And so, believe me, I read the Wall Street Journal and New York Times every day for a half hour, and my constitution can stand up to that because I'm also talking to all these thought leaders all
Right,
around the world.
right,
So
right.
I know that the narrative that newspapers have is only part of the story. I literally could not withstand looking at the Wall Street Journal and New York Times if I didn't have this other constant force in my life. And here's what I think. Um, every day when I'm scanning the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, I find something to celebrate. They do write about the most amazing things in the world. Yeah, you got to look at the headlines for about 30 to 50 other things before
Mhm.
you get to the cool thing. But it is there. And that's the only thing I worry about when people say, oh, I've gone on a news fast or I've tuned out the news entirely. I think that, oh God, that one story about
Right,
Martinez,
right, right, right.
who weighs 300 pounds and has run 7 marathons and talks about what it's like to be in a body that's so big, and yet still so healthy underneath. Like you're going to miss the story of Martinez. And I could give you 10 more like that. So that's the thing I worry about. So I'd rather than tell people to tune out the news. I like to tell people to just put up your shields, like in Star Trek, shields
Mm,
up, and you just skim through the headlines and
right,
go on a
right.
seek signs of goodness and progress, and your mind will find it.
Filter. I get the Times too, actually. So I have a similar, I think, sort of method
Stuff
than
going.
you do. What?
It's stuff going some
Yeah, it
days.
is. And like I said, because I don't want to be, I think we have an obligation to know what's going on, right? I just don't want to reside there. So in the morning, no. Right
Yes,
before I go to bed, no. Somewhere in the middle, I'm in academia. So
perfect.
yeah, somewhere in the middle. And I do filter, like I skim. I skim over all the crap that's up front, and zoom in for whatever it is that's good.
Yes,
Interesting.
that's exactly what I've seen work for a whole lot of people who don't want to just be out of touch. But I do have tons and tons of people tell me that, they haven't read a newspaper or listened to the news in years. And I think, oh gosh, my
That's
life would be
ignorance, though. Yeah.
that would be so much less rich. There would be so many good people that I'm calling up to get on my podcast.
Yeah, well, because the ignorance is dangerous, right? So there's got to
Yeah.
be, some sort of place where we're aware that there's a war going on in Gaza, yet not residing in a place where we're hearing the numbers and all that. Just like when we had the pandemic, different context. We can know
Mm,
what's going on without the constant updates. And instead, if you're a prayer, pray. If you're a candlelight
yes.
visual, good vibe person, I'd rather
Yes.
know. And I've thrown tons of good energy to both sides
Yeah.
spiritually to just heal, 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 which you can't do if you're not aware of it,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really a nice little trick. Another tip that I give people that I've discovered over time, trying to navigate this media landscape like everyone else and trying to decide what I give my attention to, that's
Right,
really huge. Who do
right.
we trust? Can I share with you my thoughts about who we should
Yes, well,
trust and give our
share your
attention
thoughts
to
on
these days?
that. And then I think we have another one in us
Yes.
too.
Okay.
So who can we trust?
So,
Isn't that a big fat question?
yes. Yes, it is super important. Okay. So I struggle with it for a long time. I even back in the day, way back. One of my kids had noticed how much I was watching a particular news channel that was
Right.
very slanted, one way or the other. And he was like a 13-year-old. And he came in to my bedroom and he put his hand on my leg and he said, Mom, you've got to stop this. You've just got to stop. Stop, stop, stop. You're always angry after you watch that stuff. You're
Oh, we
always
noticed.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I did stop. I totally did stop. I went cold turkey on it. And I tell you, after about 6 months, I just got curious one night and went back. And I could not stay with it for 5 minutes. It was so obvious to me what he had seen was going on there.
Wow. Wow, wow,
So
wow.
because I trusted that point of view.
Right.
And that was what got me. So then I went on this journey to decide who I was going to trust next. Because I really thought, that's my team. That's who I'm rooting for. I want, and okay. So I've decided that we need to look for the helpers. This is a really important thing. And there are people out there with measured, thoughtful voices. And they're doing the right thing in the most extraordinary circumstances, but they're usually not the one waving their hands and pointing at us. And if we turn down the sound, we could tell they're outraged or whatever. I like the people, if you turn down the sound on an interview, you would have no idea what their emotional state would be.
Wow.
These are the helpers. I had Mr. Rogers, good old Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
He used to say that great quote, in times of trouble. His mom used to say, in times of trouble, look for the helpers. And oh, I just got goosebumps. And so I started doing that. You know what I noticed? Let's take the war. You mentioned the war that's going on in Gaza. The other night, I just breezed through the news really quick, switching channels, and I came upon, of course, don't I? This is the way it would work for me. I haven't watched the TV news in forever, and then all of a sudden, it's a scene of a bombing, of the bomb blowing up in a street somewhere. And what I noticed, because I'm so tuned in to looking for the helpers, I noticed that everybody was running away, but there was one guy running towards. And he picked up somebody off the ground as he ran, and then he did something, and then he went somewhere else. And so while they were just doing the head talk stuff, the talking head stuff, and the stuff was still blowing up in the air and stuff, there was this person who was the helper. He was running towards the disaster, not away. And there are these quiet, and you would never notice it were you not looking for it. And it made me feel good about humanity to know that there are those people who, the firemen that ran up the
I was just
stairs
thinking of
in the Twin
911. Yeah.
Towers. Yes, right? And so anyway, I am teaching people to look for the helpers and also recognize the chaos builders. That's what I call everyone else. If people are ratcheting up the drama, or if people are acting as if a very complex problem that's probably plagued us for centuries should be
Right.
so simple. If we just did this, then it would be fine. Why don't people see it like that? I think, give me a break. This is a very complex problem for a reason. If you've got
Of
the
course.
answer and it's so simple, you just I don't even know what planet you're on. So I'm not giving them my attention. So mainly it's that, to just notice how people make you feel.
Mhm. Oh,
So
totally.
this can go with influencers too. And I learned this from an influencer I interviewed. She's a person who's very much into positive body type. She's a very big, curvy woman. And she's an influencer, has her million fans and stuff. And she told me one day that she just woke up one morning and she went through her Instagram account. And of course, because she's an influencer, she follows a whole bunch of people. And she said she just went through and she thought about the way each person made her feel. That's it. Not whether she agreed with them or whether she liked them
Right,
or
right,
whether
right.
there was some social benefit to being in their network. She just went, "Oh, she always makes me feel like crap. She
Done.
he always makes me feel scared. Oh, he always makes me feel super outraged." and and then I had another young person tell me that, remember when Facebook had this new offering just recently, like maybe 6 months ago? Forget what it's called. Yeah, it came and went. It was a kind of an attempt for Facebook to have a more positive platform. I
I
forget what
don't
it's called.
remember.
But anyway, a young influencer told me that she did that too. She moved everything over to that platform, but instead of just pressing the button that would make everything she followed move over, she used it as an excuse to go through and just keep the people who made her feel hopeful,
Oh,
curious,
nice.
collaborative, generous, kind. And anybody who left her always feeling like angry or scared or whatever about the future, she didn't bring them on.
Good. I tell you, I think too. I think too, Linda, you get this too, because once the positivity switch is sort of turned on, I know I've like walk around in a force field. And it doesn't mean I don't listen. Like I've
Yes.
fortunate to have some very good people in my lives, and if like a best friend is heart is breaking, that's we're not talking. That's different, right? And there's some feel good there because I'm authentically listening, or the other way around, or whatever. But as far as the whiners and the Debbie Downers and the wah, 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 like just like on the Peanuts cartoon, wah 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 wah. I like it's nanoseconds before I'm like exit stage left. I just figure out a polite
Yes.
way to, because people say misery loves company. That's such BS. Misery loves miserable company, and I'm not going to come off my high vibe disc up here to relate
Yes.
to you down here when you're whining
Right.
about it's like the fifth time in a row that you had a day off and it rained. I don't care. Get a raincoat.
Yes.
Like
It's
quit your
true though.
whining.
It's true though of the people we give our attention to in the media. If we just went, wow, he's just a whiner. Does he have anything? That's what actually I decided
It's the
about the
same
new.
though, isn't it?
Yes, it's the same. It's the news channel I watched. That little boy, my 13-year-old, he watched it for just a second, and he goes, "Mom, I come in here sometimes, and that lady never has anything good to say or nice to say ever."
It's the wisdom of a 13-year-old. Like, listen, because it's
And
horrible.
he was so right. And she's on the political side that you would think would be all positive and happy and all the stuff, but not really. So that's the thing. That's the recommendation I give people is look for the helpers. I mean, just really decide, what are you just mesmerized and caught your eye on social media? What did you stay with for God bless 2 3 minutes?
Mhm.
Whoa, was it somebody who was just sort of mesmerizing you by their gestures and their outrage and their emotions? Are so talk to us about that. I mean, aren't emotions super contagious? That is, I think, one of the problems with the whole influencer world is that if we just follow with our amygdala instead of our critical thinking part, we are following people that trigger our worst impulses.
Oh, no
And I
question.
think, right? I think we've got a choice. If we ever are aware of the game being played with our emotions, we can opt out.
Well, yeah. Well, just like, Wayne Dyer says it, and so do other people, Joe Dispenza and all those great contemporary thinkers. That where the focus goes, the energy flows, right? So when your son walked in your room and said, "Mom, you got to get off that show," because there was the energy was following, because thoughts are
Right.
first and we feelings next, right? We can't feel angry without thinking angry thoughts. So it makes sense wherever we place our attention on that influencers stuff, on the New York Times headline, then the energy just flows and it's like dominoes.
Yes.
It's like
And it
dominoes.
doesn't have to be like really tragic things. This woman that first turned me on to this, what she noticed was the people she was following were these kind of women that didn't have any weight problems,
Mhm.
and they always made her feel less than. They were
Oh,
always just too perfect in every posting, right? They just and what's going on in my office is only you're only seeing this much. But you saw me when we first started talking, Kim and I, that area right there was just full. And I literally went like that and just shoved it off to the floor. Just remember that that's how we're seeing most people's lives on social
oh,
media,
totally. Oh,
right?
100%. I'm so glad you said that too, because isn't that so true?
Yes.
And from the waist down, I have sweatpants on, you
Right.
know,
Yes. Yes.
because I'm comfortable. It's chilly in our house because it's big. We heat with wood, and it's comfortable. So I mean, yeah, and
Yeah.
we just but we're in make pretend land.
Yeah.
We're comparing our very authentic, real selves
Uh-huh.
to very pretend place. So I
Yeah. So I,
agree.
I just I just think look for the thoughtful, measured voices who make you feel like there's possibility out there,
Yes.
who make you feel curious, who make you feel they don't have to make you feel good, but they have to make you don't they just don't leave you knuckles dragging. But there are so many many folks that get our attention on the internet because of our amygdala and because I don't know they're on our political team or whatever. That really, I'm sorry. I just if you can tell what people are selling, their emotion by turning down the sound, then I'm out.
100%. And just like you said on the last podcast, be careful what you click on, right? Because it's that energy thing, right? Where we choose to place our attention, even if we're passively choosing by zoning out, we're still
Right.
choosing. We're making a choice to click or scroll or stay with it or whatever. Then you're setting the domino thing off to go in
Yes.
that direction. And I think it's so important to be aware of that.
Yeah, and then back to that, that worldview thing. Your worldview is good for only about as long as then you hit the next negative piece of news, right? Like let's say you ran into a positive podcast, but then, you get a bing and you respond to what breaking news is and you just go, "Oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket."
Yes. And
You
that's why we have to be deliberate with our
right.
decision making. I just
Right.
read this uplifting
Right.
thing. I just watched, the Dr. Linda show or listened to the Dr. Linda podcast. I'm feeling all the good vibes. That's not a great time to check something after
No.
dinner when you just relaxed.
No.
That you like impulsively click a headline. Terrible. Totally.
No. No.
I would say this is probably a wonderful natural wind up here because we've got way more things to talk about. Dr. Linda and
Yes.
she and I get along like peas and carrots. We're in sync and we've got a lot more points. So I say that we got a third one in us
Yeah.
and we'll just do that in a couple months. I think that sounds like
All
the
right, that
plan.
sounds great. That sounds great.
All right then. So just as a reminder to our listeners that Dr. Lynda Ulrich is going to leave her all her info underneath there. If you want to join up with the goodness exchange and also visit her podcast, the conspiracy of goodness podcast, and or sign up for her newsletter. All that will be available underneath. And for right now, I will say thank you, Dr. Linda, for spending your life minutes in this way to be with us for just a wonderful, wonderful podcast episode.
No, thank you, Kim. Thank you. I think that what we're all wanting, what we all want more of, is way more important than what we're what we finding so much friction in these days. And one of the things I like about your work is you and I want more of the same things, more joy, more love, more perspective, more patience, more and thank you for being a champion of us helping us find our best impulses.
Awesome. The world needs more.